Welcome to the Virtual Memories Show. I'm your host, Gil Roth, and we're here to preserve and promote culture, one weekly conversation at a time. You can subscribe to the Virtual Memories Show through iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Google Play, and a whole bunch of other venues. Just visit our sites, chimeraobscura.com/VM or vmspod.com to find more information, along with our RSS feed. And follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at VMSPod. Well, I don't have next week's episode in the can yet, but there are a couple likely prospects for this weekend, so we ought to have a show for you. If not, we can just pretend Memorial Day is the occasion for me to finally skip a week. But I'm in a pretty good place at the moment, missing guests notwithstanding. And again, I've got prospects, but I'm as on top of my day job as I can be, given its unpredictability and demands that come out of the blue. But, I'm feeling pretty good there. I am back up to a regular 20 or so miles a week of running, and that really helps my mood and is also helping me get back to my target weight, which is a whole thing for me. But anyway, and I'm drawing every day, which just brings me a lot of joy, which we talk about this week, as well as the show 2 weeks from now, which I recorded this weekend, but you'll hear that in 2 weeks. Anyway, neither here nor there. The upside is things are good. I'm also reading a lot, both for the podcast and for fun/edification, I guess. All of that said, me being in a good place either means I am in the manic phase of my undiagnosed bipolarity, or that something in my world is about to come crashing down. The fact that I can't really think of another alternative for what feeling good means doesn't speak well for me, but, that's who I am. Anyway, let's get to this week's show. Dmitry Samarov is returning for his just about annual visit, this time to talk about his new book, Old Style. Unlike Dimitri's past collections of memoir and music reviews and some journalism, Old Style is a work of fiction based on his years of bartending. But like his previous books, this one also includes his amazing illustrations throughout. Dmitry, for those of you who are first-timers to the show or to his experience, is an artist and writer, painter, sketch artist, etc. You'll learn all about that during the conversation. Old Style. The book is episodic rather than plot-driven, and it skips around in time among the episodes, covering two different bars and their patrons in Chicago, all narrated by a Dmitry stand-in over years and through a couple of major world events that sort of tie the book together. But like I say, it's less plot-driven. It's also less about the narrator as a character than about the world he inhabits and observes. While there are judgments, the narrator doesn't spare himself. And he also doesn't make himself out to be the great artist slumming among the rubes. He's Dmitry, but he's not above the situation that he's in. So I enjoyed Old Style. The writing is just gorgeous in parts and somehow different than some of his other books, just in terms of the sort of craft that goes into some of the descriptions. I was struck from the first chapter onwards about that and how it contrasts with some of his other pieces. But the thing also about it is that the chapters sort of coalesce around themes at times. Multiple chapters will kind of drift into the same sort of overall topic before dispersing into other threads and branches. And it makes the book sort of work like a conversation, if you know what I mean. Things start to come together and then you just start talking about something else, or, another person comes in the bar and things change. Now, even though I quit drinking almost 9 years ago next week, I think in 2012, early June. It wasn't a sobriety thing. It was just doctor's advice. But anyway, and I haven't hung out in a bar in a long, long, long time. I enjoyed Old Style a lot. And I really like this direction in Dimitri's work. So Old Style is self-published. It's a really nice physical book, hardcover with a cloth binding. It's something. Anyway, you can find Old Style through the shop link at Dimitri's site, which is DimitriSamarov.com. And I'll spell that out later and give you a link to that in the show and episode notes for this one. Now, this is Dimitri's 5th appearance on the show, 6th if you count the COVID check-in we did last year, which in my obsessive-compulsive way, I don't count as regular episodes because I didn't number them and blah, blah, blah. So what I mean is there's a little more familiarity to the conversation than with a first-time guest. I don't think we fall into any sort of inside baseball or, a continuation of something that he and I have talked about privately that you wouldn't be, clued into at all. So anyway, that's the most of caveat I can give for this one. Here's Dimitri's bio. Dmitry Samarov paints and writes in Chicago. He is the author and illustrator of 6 books. He sends out a newsletter every Monday. An absurd amount of his work is collected at his website, DimitriSamarov.com, which is now 17 years old. And now, the 2021 Virtual Memories conversation with Dmitry Samarov. Tell me about Old Style, how it came together, and sort of how it contrasts with the other books you published in the last couple of years.
Sure. So Old Style, unlike the other books I've published, is called, or quote unquote, fiction. And it's fiction because some names are changed and the timelines are tweaked and a couple of people are sort of composites. But basically, I didn't have to make anything up. As I never do. And I've never understood why anybody would make anything up, because the world is so fucking weird. And the stories you get just by, kind of shutting up and listening is all you'll ever need in my experience. But it's a book of sort of interconnected stories set in 2 bars, roughly between 9/11 and our current plague. So that's as good an elevator pitch as I've got so far for what it is.
Yeah, how's it contrast with the cab writing in particular, given that they're both sort of occupation and observation?
Well, obviously, just the venue format is different because bars are different than taxis, but it goes in some of the episodes, some of the stories kind of go deeper on tangents, either from the narrator's life or some regular from one of the bars. And it's also not pegged to a particular time as carefully as the cab stories always were. Because when I was writing the cab stories, there were actual things that were happening, and it was important to me to say when it happened and where it happened specifically in the city, whether Chicago or Boston. Whereas in this case, I intentionally blurred the timeline. So reading through, there's times when you're not sure which bar I'm talking about, and that's intentional. And when in the last 20 years it's happening, because I realized that one of the things that happens in bars and to regulars in bars, and it's sort of the purpose, what they're looking for is this kind of twilight place where they're always whatever age they want it to be, and time sort of stops, and it's always night in a proper bar, I think, and it's always the same night in a way.
Was there a sort of bar writing you wanted to avoid? I mean, there's the obvious, and you have a section on him on Bukowski, but were there other things like, I don't want to fall into those sorts of tropes and influences?
A lot of one of the recurring themes of the book is sort of like this battle against nostalgia, which the people in the bar are always very susceptible to this kind of like golden years yesterday, and romanticizing something that, more often than not just never was. And some of the books written in especially the kinds of bars I'm writing about sort of fall for that, for a kind of sentimentality that I'm just not sort of constitutionally,
wired to.
Wired to. Yeah, I just don't have. I don't have that. You know what I mean? I also don't romanticize drinking in general. I'm not an alcoholic, luckily. Although I've spent, I've done my fair share of drinking. I just don't. It's not a problem I have. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I don't get that. Whatever the gimlet-eyed, things don't start looking better than they actually are very often for me.
Did the time spent in a bar influence your drinking habits over the years? Or was there any cautionary, like, yep, that is a sign that I have been drinking too much
absolutely.
Because I don't end up like that guy?
Yeah, the seeds of this thing started about 20 years ago when I worked at a 4:00 bar called the Blue Light, which it remains the Blue Light in the book. And it was a bar populated by cops and rednecks, and you couldn't really tell them apart most of the time. Like the kind of place where you wouldn't be weird for a cop to put his service weapon on the bar next to his stein of beer, that kind of thing. And the year I worked there, I barely drank because so my first effort to write about that bar was called Dive, subtitled My Year Sitting Ringside to Hell. So just watching those people and what they did to themselves day to day definitely kept me from drinking. I would refuse shots, and they were trying to make friends, but I just couldn't participate in it. I couldn't even pretend to be their friend or be sort of the same species. So that's where it started, the bar thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and you contrast that in the book with the fictional second bar and more of a sense, I don't say camaraderie, but fellowship or something with the second bar.
Yeah, in the second bar, I definitely feel sort of like part of this small community, even though I hold myself apart because that's just what I do. Because it lets me watch and listen. It lets me do the thing I do in life. But I definitely got sucked into a feeling of camaraderie and a feeling of sort of being part of something, which gets taken away at the end, for reasons out of my control. In which the pandemic kind of put the cherry on top too. This book was most of the way done before the plague started, but the plague sort of like put an exclamation point to it. The whole
Did
thing.
the isolation of the past year, not just for the new stuff that you wrote, but did it cause you to go back and look at some of the earlier stuff and revise?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I did a lot of the revising during this last spring. I'd been working on it. I'd been building up to it for several years. But in the meantime, I had to get rid of the other stuff that had piled up on my plate beforehand. So because for the previous whatever X amount of years, I'd been trying to play sort of within the publishing industry to get an agent, to get a publisher, completely unsuccessfully for years. I'd had a bunch of material pile up, and I had to get that off my plate. So the last time you had me on, which was, let's see, it was
beginning of 2020, right before the plague. Yeah.
Yes, in New York. And that was about a book called Soviet Stamps, which was a sort of like childhood memoir or how I started doing art thing. But that book was supposed to, I was hoping that it was really originally done in like 2015. And I'd been trying to place it ever since unsuccessfully. So, and then in the intervening years, I put out another book of music sketches called Music to My Eyes with sort of reminiscences. And then I self-published Soviet Stamps. Then already during shutdown, I decided to re-edit and combine my two cab books into one book, which is called All Hack, and I put that out last summer.
Yeah.
So then,
and
when
we did
I was finally
a bookstore appearance for. I remember we
did
it for the show, but yeah.
Virtual bookstore appearance for that book last summer or fall, maybe. I don't remember when we did that, but
it's all a blur.
Yeah, right. Time doesn't exist. Was it Time is a Flat
Time is a Flat Circle?
Right. Yeah. The future governor of Texas said, yeah. That's what they're.
Now, as I remember True Detective, it's actually one of the other guys who says that to Matthew McConaughey. But
is it Woody that says it?
Or? No, it's one of the mystical thugs who they end up gunning down. But yeah, it says Time is a Flat Circle. I think McConaughey says, "What is that, Nietzsche?" and then starts shooting into the woods. But I only saw it once, and I may be misremembering, in a good way. But
but in any case, so I had all this stuff that had piled up that I needed to clear off before I could go on to the current thing, which for the last few years really has been this bar book. And it's been sort of front of mind because I'd spent up until last March, the previous 5 years working part-time in a bar. So that was kind of like the setting and the kind of stories that I was gathering and that were in my head.
Are you glad for the extra time? Do you feel this would have been a different book had you gotten to it in, 2015, 16? Knowing that, the stories wouldn't have come obviously because of chronology, but, was it the right time, I guess, to really bring this together?
I think it couldn't have come any earlier than last year because I didn't have enough barroom kind of experience and stories until then. Like it took the time of gathering it, you know what I mean? Actually putting in the time in the bars to learn it and to see it and to kind of get the rhythms of people and sketching out and kind of finding the commonalities between regulars and bars and how in a certain way they're all the same, how they tell these same stories about themselves and about others. I mean, the bar I worked at and actually just found out yesterday will possibly start working at again in the next couple of months. They're going to try to reopen. So,
congrats, I guess.
Yeah. The real life main model for the Albatross in the book is a bar called the Skylark in Chicago, but not the only model, but the main model. There's other bars that were posed for it as well, but yeah. I mean, man, I lost my train of thought. Yeah,
the timing and the collecting the stories and getting that experience.
Yeah,
and the general, the archetypes, I guess, and the the individuals.
I mean, a book, it needs to have particularities, but it also has to have a kind of overarching theme. And in order to find that kind of stuff, you need to put in the time to really get a little bit of a big picture about it. And I definitely needed that. Probably the earliest this book could have been published is maybe a year ago, maybe. Yeah. But I don't think I had been satisfied by the time the shutdown started with what I had.
Yeah. And the isolation in that respect helped. Every artist I know basically says, this is the best time of my life because I didn't have to interact with people. Yeah. But in that respect, having that I know. So that degree of distance, helped in terms of just being able to look at the material that you'd accumulated. Yeah.
I mean, it removed almost all distractions. Any pressure or temptation to socialize was gone. So all I had left was this room in which I had to make things, all day and sometimes into the night, because there was nothing else to do. And thinking about, what was going on outside was not productive or good for anyone's mental health. So, yeah.
Now, how's the writing differ from the past work? How do you see the prose itself and your approach to the writing?
I don't know if I could say exactly, pinpoint exactly the difference, but I think there is one. I think in this book I was able to incorporate some references to art and writing of the past in a way that I couldn't in the other books because there was just no place for it. So then, like you said, I could mention Bukowski, I mentioned Tom Waits, I mentioned all these kind of like cliche like images and people associated with the kind of bars I'm writing about. You know what I mean? And reckon with their shadow and how they color people's perception of these kinds of places. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And how much, I would say, either a temptation or a lack of temptation and ego destruction was there to, more fully color yourself as the narrator? To give the narrator, more of a backstory or explanation as to who he is, why he's there.
I'm always my first impulse is not to reveal that much.
Sure.
Not out of any kind of secrecy or insecurity. Even it's just that I don't think my life is that interesting, my day-to-day life. But that said, almost every sort of episode in the book, like concerning like romantic entanglements and women and stuff, is absolutely lifted from my own life.
Sure.
And I did well enough that I have an ex that's really furious with me already. So, so I did my job. This material is there. So why not use it? My attitude about sort of revealing secrets or whatever, sharing intimate details is that I was there, so I'm entitled to at least half of it. You know what I mean? And
sure.
If they feel badly, they can express themselves in their own favored medium. As I sort of, I don't know if you got to the last my acknowledgments page, which is it's called slander.
Yeah.
It's called slander, and I addressed this issue pretty directly. That if somebody has a problem with what I wrote, they're free to kind of like take their revenge in their own way, and I'm totally fine with it. It's fair game.
The upside being that you have virtually no assets for anybody to sue for, so that's also good.
No, it's a blood from a stone type situation here.
I was thinking more in terms of like whether the narrator would have made a comment of when my family came over from the Soviet Union or anything that reveals I don't think the decision not to include that sort of stuff and just to have the narrator as this person who's somewhat active but also observing a lot of
the narrator does. I mean, there are some references to making artwork and there's some references to driving a cab. I think I threw a couple of those in there, which are all biographically related to me, obviously, and the narrator's name is Dmitry. But you get into this whole autofiction thing and how much is real and how much isn't. I don't know how interesting that is exactly, but the fact of being an immigrant just wasn't part of this story. Like it would have been sort of shoehorning for no reason. You know what I mean? I don't think it played a part. If there was some detail where it would have, then I might have put it in. I actually, now that I'm thinking about it, there was an episode with a woman that came in the bar who happened to also be a Soviet immigrant. And originally, where a lot of these episodes started their life as rough drafts or first drafts in my newsletter that I send out every Monday. I try out stuff on there all the time that sometimes makes it into more permanent form like books. But that was how we got to talking, was a kind of shared ancestry. But by the time the episode made it into the book, I realized that it just wasn't that important. It wasn't part of the story. That wasn't the part that I was interested in. What I was interested in was that I wanted to talk to her more, and she went to the bathroom, and then I never saw her again. You know? Yeah.
And I found, we're similar in that respect. Oh, sorry, go on. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, you've read some of my other books. Do you think that the writing's different in this one, or
especially early on, it felt more the artifice, but in a good way. That some of the sentences felt more crafted in old style, less reportage almost.
Yeah. For sure.
And more thought about and worked on in a good way. But it just struck me that this is a different sort of book that Dimitri's writing than Soviet Stamps and some of the Music to My Eyes, or the blog writing that adapted into memoir for All Hack.
Yeah,
but
no, I agree.
So how about organizing it? Were there putting it together once you had all the pieces?
Yeah,
I know you have some chronology, but not like you said, it's not explicit.
I mean, there's a bookend kind of thing in it. And it sort of is bookended by a kind of present where, and it ends with the destruction of a kind of a bridge, an overpass, and ends with a death. And I had that early on. But as far as what came in between, it changed a lot. Once I decided that it was going to be fiction, I first tried to stitch it all together into a sort of linear narrative, and found that frustrating and sort of unrewarding, because it didn't feel natural or right. That in the episodic nature of life in a bar didn't really lend itself to a straight through line. You know what I mean? So then I went back and to a sort of patchwork, and that's where I started also to play with the timeline and the blurring of when each thing was actually happening. And when I switched almost the entire book to present tense. I mean, the entire book more or less is in present tense.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Did you feel like you needed to give yourself permission to do that? To say, okay, this doesn't have to be, again, a reportage. This doesn't have to be, 100% accurate to the facts as we know them, as opposed to, making art.
Yeah, I don't know if it's permission, but I realized early on that there was enough people that I was writing about that are very much alive that I needed plausible deniability and to protect the guilty and all that, that I couldn't use their real names. I couldn't use the places they actually worked, or my the particularities of my relationship with them.
Sure.
It just wouldn't work, and it didn't serve the purpose of the story I was trying to tell. Yeah.
Yeah. Have any of your people read the book yet, or not?
A few. A lot of the bartenders are very interested in the book, like in the people that hang out in these bars. It seems like at least initially, like there's been a little bit, whatever X percentage more enthusiasm about this book than the last couple. Maybe because it's like a new thing and it's something that they can relate to more personally. I think
more the latter. Yeah, I think hey, I might be in this. That's
yeah. Yeah, they may not be happy once they find themselves in there, but
yeah, that's always the case. I'm going to be famous or infamous. Yeah.
Yeah, the thing I had to cut a lot of, and that I always watched for, was this kind of, that it wasn't a settling of scores or a sour grapes kind of thing, where I was just punishing, say women that dumped me, for getting my revenge. And hopefully I got rid of most of that, and that I didn't place this narrator at above the people that he was observing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. He seems, in those scenarios, he seems as I don't want to say culpable, but just, in the moment as everybody else,
I wasn't interested in erecting this kind of like hero to whom things are, gets the upper hand necessarily. Because he doesn't,
That was, I mentioned it in last week's show with Dorothy Gallagher, that it's one of Philip Lopate's lessons from the Art of the Personal Essay giganto introduction that he wrote with: the personal essay is not a place for settling scores. So, just get away from this is why everybody else was wrong and I should have been lauded mode. And I'm like, oh, well, that scraps this entire essay about my father. Let me throw that out and start over again and figure out how to, make this work.
I mean, it's a thing I notice in a lot of fiction too, where the stand-in for the author is even, is whatever way he's made to suffer or whatever torments, he comes out either as the hero or as the aggrieved party, never as somebody that's culpable, or as bad as the people that are doing the things to him,
Well, the interesting thing is I just finished John le Carré's memoir, The Pigeon Tunnel. And there's a big chapter about his father. His father was a con man who worked on an epic scale and fucked up his life immeasurably. Yeah. Gave him opportunities, but also fucked up a lot of things in David Cornwell's life, but John le Carré, pen name, whatever. Yeah. And for years, he had been trying to write a fiction with his father, basically as a stand-in for, his own upbringing. And it was only after his dad's death he was finally able to do it. And in so doing, he realized what was wrong with all of his drafts, which was that his stand-in character was the victim. And he's like, no, my stand-in has to be guilty of something absolutely terrible. That's not necessarily, the fault of his father or something like that, but, terrible thing that he himself has done. And he said that's when A Perfect Spy opened up and his magnum opus was there. But, that same thing of like, every time I try writing about him, I'm making myself out to be the victim, which is fine for me as a human being, but bad for art. And that's...
It's really not. Yeah, I don't even know if I can think of a time when that really actually works. And I don't start suspecting the author of kind of putting his thumb on the scale. You know what I mean? Like this is like it's, and that every author obviously has that power, but like abusing that power is not.
It makes for bad art.
Any favor. Yeah.
Yeah. You end up looking at it saying, well, the whole deck is stacked. And this poor protagonist who's an English professor who just wants to have an affair with a girl half his age is just the aggrieved party. That's
exactly
invariably where that stuff goes.
Yeah. And
yeah. I mean, the half your age thing, whatever, but it's neither here nor there. But I want to ask. Yeah,
there is an episode like that in my book too. So I did that. I crossed that off the to-do list. Sadly, I did that, and it's in there.
I was talking to a pal. Well, I'll fill you in on a story somewhat about that with a pal from a conversation I recently had, but. Neither here nor there again. Yeah. But the thing I'm interested in from the run of books you've put together over the last couple of years, you're designing your own books.
Yes.
How's the process changed for you? What have you gotten better at? What do you see now and say, oh, well, that's what I should have been doing 3 books ago. And, luckily I nailed it in time for this one.
Well, speaking of, I guess you're going to cut out our pre-ramble about Adobe Creative Suite, but in order to for those of the audience that's going to miss that scintillating interlude, dealing with Adobe is there's a part of Dante's Inferno that's devoted to it, dealing with that company. But in order to make a professional book, at least in the last 20 years, you use a program called InDesign, which they will not sell to you standalone anymore, which you have to sign up for a monthly subscription to. And I've used Photoshop for a million years, and I've got a pretty good handle on Photoshop, and I have an old enough version that comes separate, standalone. I don't have to pay every month. And I use it a lot to edit my artwork for my website and stuff. But this InDesign program is just a friggin' nightmare. And it took a couple of books probably for me to master the limited way that I needed it to work. So I would say, I mean, I have affection for, so the first book I did kind of made soup to nuts was this Music to My Eyes, which came out in 2019. And yeah, I'll flip through it every now and then, but there's a lot of cringing. There's a lot of stuff. And that's just, it's a function of, as with anything you get into, it's a new thing, and the reps make it simpler and easier. So the last 2 out of the 4 that I've made this way have gone much smoother, you know, and by the time I'm ready to sign up for my month of InDesign, I'm ready to go, and I knocked out that part of the process in a couple of weeks, probably, you know, just because I had all my stuff ready. So yeah, it's an accumulation of experience, knowing what the printers can do and can't do, stuff like that. I've been very happy with them pretty much, but it feels like with this old style, it's the end of a sort of a chapter, and whatever I do next will be in a different format. And I don't know, maybe I can even get somebody to throw some money at me and participate in promotions, etc. You know,
sure.
One can dream, you know.
What do you look at working on next, or is it as far as prose, art, whatever, or is that what the process is?
The art is always ongoing, and the art will always be the main thing, and the writing is always a sort of a side thing that at times takes over, but will always be subsidiary to the visual art. And in case people haven't seen my books, they all have a lot of art in them. I can't conceive of making a book without pictures in it. I don't know. That would just be boring to me. I don't know. For me personally, maybe not for the reader, but for me, it's an integral part of the whole thing. I think in images first, and the pictures are often the jumping off points for the writing, and I doubt that'll ever change. But one of the things that happened during the lockdown is that because I couldn't hang out in coffee shops or bars or on buses or trains and draw people, I went through my archive of like old homework assignments and embarrassing childhood drawings and started making collages out of them. And it feels like that's a thing that I could keep doing for years, because it sort of incorporates, there's bits of writing in it all over the place. And it's a way of making it all into one cohesive statement, the art and the writing, in a way that I haven't conceived of yet. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So they're like, it's not at all separate, the writing and the visual. It's all of a piece. It all sort of works together. Maybe not in a super obvious or coherent way, but in an intuitive and kind of poetic way. And I can see keeping that going for a long time. As far as writing, go ahead.
I was going to ask, what got you started with the collage thing? What was your moment of, let me cut this up and start putting this together in a different way?
Well, it's funny. As so often in life, once you start doing a thing and then you look back at what you've done before, and it turns out that I've done this before, but it was just an in passing kind of thing. It was for design projects, for like poster designs and other things. Mm-hmm. I've sort of melded and cut up pieces and made new things before. But the more I did it, the more, I guess, my primary mode is to work from firsthand, from looking, you know? Yeah. So I'll look out the window and try to render a scene or have somebody pose for me. And I never understood how, say, abstract artists work. Like, it just seems really random. Like, why make this mark rather than another mark? But here, with this pile of stuff that has a history, a personal sort of resonance, it doesn't feel random at all. It feels like I'm taking real things and sort of making them relate to each other and figuring out the symmetries or like the way they clash with or counterpoint. And it's hard to explain, but it doesn't feel that different than what I was doing before. And when I'm sitting now looking at my wall of like in progress stuff, and I have a cityscape, like a view of a river next to a couple of these collages, and the way that the elements are composed are totally related. It's just, I have an innate way of composing a two-dimensional picture that isn't changed because I'm not looking at my subject, rather assembling it from old things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there a degree
I don't know
of
if that answered anything, but
no, it does. It's something I'm interested in. It's like that Burroughs, and Jason cut-up method,
the cut-up,
not in a cosmological sense, but and I know, there's a psychologist I interviewed who is also involved in collage method as a form of analysis, just in terms of, again, like you were saying, you start to see the continuities and resonances, I guess, of the way you work when you take certain things out of context or start, mixing them up in different ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I've even made a couple of like quote unquote books out of it. I've made 4 of these. I've taken old notebooks or kind of thrift store hardcover books and ripped out most of the pages and put these collages inside of them. So I'm making a sort of book, but it's not a traditional book, and it's not also a multiple. It's just
an art object by itself.
Yeah. Yes.
And you see, I don't mean it in a, is this a direction you're going to go? But, is this a thing you see yourself continuing or finding a terminal point of, or just something you say, this is something I can do and will keep doing?
I think I'm going to keep doing, because it's early on. I mean, I've been making art, I would say seriously for going on 40 years. But I've made, I have intentionally made a collage for, like a year, Before that, there was a couple, but like really maybe in high school as an assignment. It just wasn't a mode that I ever thought about very much until more recently. So there's a long way to go. And there's a lot of possibilities, which I'll need to find by going through them.
What's the learning curve been like? And we can rattle on about this incessantly. I started drawing a couple of months ago, and it's just been this insane, learning curve. But
it's great. It's great. It's been fun to watch.
Well, the way I realized, it's unfortunate, but I was putting all of the images chronologically into a Flickr album recently so that they'd all be there instead of Instagram and Twitter and everywhere else. So it would just be those. Yeah. And I realized, and it's going to sound horrible, but it's just us and nobody's listening. It looks like a stroke victim recovering. I look early once I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah. This is your therapy from, isolation or whatever, then that's fine. I mean, who cares?
Seriously,
who cares
the early ones, the early
Yeah.
ones look like a guy who just had a stroke, and over the weeks and weeks of daily practice, they get better and better, or at least more real-ish. But I was like, oh my God, I look like I'm a stroke victim who's getting better. Okay, that's something. At 50, at least there's that.
It makes. On. I mean, it's somebody who hasn't drawn before making marks on a page. It's tentative, because there's no. For the average person who doesn't draw, it's one thing if you have a notebook with lines or a graph or whatever and you're writing, but just looking at a blank page is, why would you do one thing rather than another thing? Like it's different for me. Right. I've got, I've done this like thousands and thousands. I don't know how many times. Started with a blank page. So that's like, that's where I live. That's where I'm comfortable. But I think I wrote you this or told you this. I mean, I'm envious of you just getting to start this, I can't have that. There's just no way I can have the experience that you're having now, you know?
You do have it to an extent with the collage.
Yeah.
So just in terms of it being and that's what I was wondering, like as a different form than you're used to working in, are you seeing aspects of, this is how I either should have been doing it, or this is all revealing, something about my art to me in a way that I just didn't see?
Well, what it does every time I take up a new medium, this happened when I took up magic markers a few years ago, like first time since childhood. And the reason was that I wanted to do drawings of people on buses and trains in color. And I couldn't, obviously I couldn't take paints onto the train or the bus. So what I did was I went to a thrift store and bought like an old lady's purse and piled it full of markers in every color. And I would put them around my neck while I sat and drew people and just pull out the markers. I'm sure I looked like a crazy person, or crazier than I
but the markers
would.
don't have anything to do with that. So
yeah, exactly. But that was a real revelation about it gave me a different a different attitude towards color, because prior to that I'd used more or less the same palette for going on 25 years, and and I knew it really well. I had about 6 colors that I always used. I knew how to mix them. I would mix them differently each time, but now I had like 35 colors. And they were not mixed. I had to use them as they were. I could mix them optically the way in Impressionism, when you put 2 colors next to each other, they vibrate in a certain way. The stuff that Impressionism came about because of advances in color. Scientists found out about the color spectrum. You know what I mean? In the 19th century. Prior to that, people didn't know that. And so, yeah, you discover things and you adjust. But now, even when I'm not using markers, the way I use color has changed because of that. So these collages now inform the paintings and drawings I do. Every new medium kind of talks to all the other ones. Yeah.
And have you had periods where you felt you weren't growing artistically, or have you always felt that, you needed to be pushing in some way or changing?
I haven't had a truly like fallow kind of period, like stopped kind of period in many years. And I feel very fortunate about that. I have, but my sort of way of working is to throw a lot of stuff against the wall, and I don't know what percentage of it will stick or will stand the test of time or whatever, but I make a lot of work. You know what I mean? And it takes retrospect. It takes years to figure out what was actually good and what really sucked. But if I let it out of the studio, if I show it to other people, publish it somewhere, that means at least at the moment, I think it's good enough to attempt, to have a life of its own. Whether it does or doesn't takes time to see.
Yeah. When you talk about the test of time, what does that mean to you? In terms of legacy or quote unquote immortality or whatever, when it comes to your art and what it means.
as far as I understand it, I probably won't be around to enjoy or see like my place in the world cemented in any way. You know what I mean? Yeah. That's not, we don't get that. But, right. In the absence of children or spouses or any other kind of like metric or accumulated riches or however else people measure worth or as a person, all I have is this work. It's what I've dedicated my life to. So if anybody remembers me, this is what they're going to remember. So maybe a couple of them, hopefully a painting or two and maybe a book. I don't know. Yeah. That would be
Except for those
nice.
women who are pissed off at you. But I'm
Oh
kidding.
yeah.
Go on.
Hopefully they'll forget. I'm hoping they met nicer men, by now. I really do. Each and every one of them.
Oh, let me ask: when we talk about old style and the illustrations in it, did people in bars get uptight when you drew them, or were they too far gone to realize you were drawing them?
Well, one of the beauties that I've observed over and over in public sketching in public spaces is that, and as smartphones have taken over people's lives, is people are just completely oblivious. They're so into their own thing, they don't notice a thing around them except how it concerns them. And from decades of doing this, it's not like I stare at people. I'll glance over and glance down. I've gotten good at not making people aware that I am, watching them. But I always am, just so they know. I'm always watching them and eavesdropping on their conversations and remembering the worst things they said,
Well, yesterday was my first solo in New York thing in 14 months, and went to Central Park because I got there early and was looking for a tree to draw, and people were just walking by saying the dumbest shit, and I thought, oh, how nice. I haven't heard people just saying dumb shit for 14 months now. I've been isolated here in the woods.
We just missed each other because, as you know, I was in New York, was it last weekend for a day. But I also, since I was going to the Met for the Alice Neal show, I got there early and I sat on a park bench on Fifth Avenue and watched a bunch of dogs and the people they were attached to walk by, Yeah.
It's a very, very different city. And just being in Central Park on a nice day and taking out a sketch pad, I realized I'm like, I might look like a weird guy, but I already look like a weird guy because of the hair and everything else. So, I figure it's New York. No one's going to care. I'll just draw stuff and they just
the level of self-involvement, and especially in New York, you should never underestimate it.
It's different in my little neighborhood here in New Jersey. Like I have a little stool, this little 3-legged wooden stool I fold out and sit down sometimes if I'm going to draw a neighbor's, out in the road, drawing one of their trees. And, nobody comes out. Nobody asks, what the hell are you doing? I think they either figure out it's okay, or you're that guy we've always seen walking the Greyhound, so you're a local. You're not casing the joint or anything.
Do you see like a curtain move aside and eyes looking out?
I don't even look. I haven't even looked. Only one guy came out, and he's a guy I've known for years. He was heading out to leave to go somewhere. He's like, oh, drawing the dogwood, huh? I wish that other one would grow in pretty well too. I'm like, yeah, man, I'm sorry. I'm standing in your driveway for half an hour drawing. It's just a thing I started. I don't know what the hell's wrong with me. But it's it's a weird trip, and I'm going to go on my own tangent about this stuff. But what I realized from drawing these things and not taking photos of them to accompany them, even from the beginning, I didn't think at any point, oh, I need to show people what the original looks like versus this. Yeah. It's just this. And everybody's a fucking photographer now.
Yep.
Everybody can take, almost world-class pictures out there. I'm like, I've somehow lost interest in something that I used to do all the goddamn time. Now it's like, okay, I'll take a picture of something that's particularly special in that moment. But otherwise I'm like, drawing a tree or whatever the hell I'm looking at seems to be both more fulfilling and capturing something that, this fits on Instagram doesn't, No. But again, you and I are weird people as far as this stuff goes. So we're anti-influencers.
I have a very different relationship with photography than you. I have a lot of bones to pick with it. And one of which, for the purposes of visual art, is that when you draw from a photograph, you take on, you get a lot of bad habits and kind of distortions that a camera lens just necessarily gives to an image, which our eyes just don't. I'll argue till the cows come home that nobody's ever seen the world the way a camera lens has.
Right.
Things aren't frozen that way. The colors are wrong. The shadows are wrong. It's all wrong. So if you had been drawing from your trees from a photograph, you might get nice drawings, but they wouldn't be the same, and the relationship definitely wouldn't be the same of what you got out of it. You know what I mean? Because then you could use any photo of any tree. I have to use photographs for work stuff all the time. Especially my main and most lucrative racket, which is pet portraits.
Right.
Obviously, dogs aren't being shipped to Chicago to pose for me, which would be fun. But they don't sit still, and the owners don't know me that well, so they send me their favorite photographs. And the way that it works for me is that just out of muscle memory and all those decades of doing it, I look at the photographs, but I make them look like as if the photographs didn't exist, Right.
Yeah.
And they're portraits the same way they're portraits of people,
Yeah. Yeah, it's a different, just doing this and learning to see differently. I'll put it this way. My memory was never great, but, I was drawing a tree a couple of days ago. The bugs were driving me insane. And I thought, I'm going to go home and finish this tree from memory, because I know what it looks like now. I know how the leaves are spaced. I know what I'm trying to get. Yeah. I will go home and finish it up. And it was fine. And I thought, okay, I'm not only learning to see, I'm learning to remember in ways I just never had. And at 50, it's a weird thing to have picked up. But, as one of my readers of my email said recently, at 70, you'll be saying, thank God I picked this up at 50, as opposed to now when I'm pissed off I didn't start it when I was much younger. But yeah. So tell me about the New York trip. Oh, sorry. Go on.
Oh yeah. I mean, I know it's your fallback to beat yourself up about things, but just fucking enjoy something for once, Gil.
Oh, I love it. The thing that I realized,
I can tell.
what hit me in the moment, I don't know how normal people function. I don't think about other stuff.
Yes.
It's not that I go automatic. I am thinking while I'm drawing, but I'm not thinking about the generic drug user fees. I'm not thinking about this person's dumb comment on X, Y, and Z. I'm just thinking about how I'm drawing this.
Yeah,
and,
This is exactly why, a lot of artists, like me included, don't need stuff like meditation or religion or any of this other shit, that people do to like quiet their mind or center or whatever, because doing this thing does all that. It exercises all those things that you get from like a mantra or whatever else, that a lot of people go to quiet the mind or to focus. Yeah. It's one of the best things about it.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I just, because people, when I have mentioned that, they say, oh, but you go running, don't you kind of zone out then? I'm like, no, I'm constantly calculating. All the time I'm out running, I'm calculating distances, when I'm going to get back. Will I be able to do this? Do I have time to stop at the market to pick up some stuff for breakfast? All sorts of shit goes through my head.
I would blame some of the physical injuries just on that.
No, I keep my form pretty good, but yeah, it's just one of those things. I'm like, I didn't realize
the weighing on the mind is like somehow.
Oh yeah.
Physically damaging.
we joke that it's psychosomatic instead of psychosomatic, but yeah, that's the neurotic Jewish vibe. But it took me weeks and weeks into doing this before I realized I wasn't thinking about other stuff. And I thought, oh, now that I'm aware of it, is that going to be a problem? And no, I discovered even being aware of it, you still need to engage, I still need to engage the brain to draw.
Yeah, no matter your skill level or whatever, it takes all your attention to do it properly. Like there's no room for anything else if you're actually engaged in doing that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Right.
That's the great thing about it.
So you could have told me 5 years ago. I would have started. I'm just kidding. It literally just took this.
Hey, Gil, I got a solution for you.
Yeah.
All your neuroses will be gone if you just start drawing trees. Yeah.
Ooh.
Would you have believed me? No.
No. I needed my oddball experience of watching Painting with John on HBO to think, I got to go draw a tree and see what happens. And
that guy. Yeah.
I know we won't go into it, but you've got a history, but regardless, that was my moment. I had that, and was like, I know I have a sketch pad downstairs somewhere. Let me pick that up and see what happens. And now we know, unfortunately.
You wanted to hear about New York?
Tell me about the trip and comparisons with New York and Chicago. I think you also hit Boston. I don't recall.
Well, the whole reason I ended up in New York was that I was visiting my parents who live in suburban Boston, in Brookline. And I've done this. I went 3 times last year. I rented a car and drove from Chicago to Boston to visit my parents. And each time staying 3, 4, 5 days, I guess. But this was the first time that I tried a stopover in New York, primarily because there's an Alice Neal retrospective at the Met that everybody should see because she's the best. I'd planned to stop on my way back and sort of just stop in and see the show and keep driving. But then I decided to stay an extra day and actually got to New York on a Saturday instead of the Sunday that I had planned. That's when sort of the trip turned weird because I needed a place to stay, so I booked a hotel room, and it being New York, parking would be a problem. So I found a hotel which advertised free parking, and then I did it through a really shitty website called Priceline.com. I don't know if your listeners have heard of it, but yeah, they're awful, and I'm probably after I get off talking with you, I'll delete my membership in it because they weren't helpful.
You got screwed.
I got screwed, and it's sloppiness more than anything. But what happened was I get to this hotel, which is in the West 30s in this kind of like weird zombie construction zone part of the city where I don't know what the hell they're building over there, but it's some kind of like Mad Max dystopian whatever.
Oh, the West 30s?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all Hudson Yards. That's this giant super office thing.
Right.
Yeah.
It's got nothing to do with any kind of city, that's for sure. It's
a city in itself. Yeah, well, it's going to have its own power, internet, water, etc., so that rich people can survive the next big hit that New York takes. Oh, there's a whole crazy thing
haven't all the rich people moved to the country, or a lot of them have. I know that the housing markets in a lot of these outer whatever places have gone through the roof because the rich people are afraid of New York now. But in any case, I get to this place and there's a chain padlocking the doors, and it's glass doors, and I look inside and there's some like kind of mattresses on the floor in the lobby that's like about a staircase down. Not a hint of life. I call the number, nobody, not even an answering machine. And then I spend the following 5-6 hours trying to reach Priceline to explain to them what has happened. By the time, in the meantime, I've gone to another website and booked a perfectly decent room at another place and found out that it being Saturday night into Sunday morning, you can actually find street parking at this time in Manhattan, which is crazy. It probably won't last, but you can now.
It's still feasible. Yeah, I didn't try yesterday when I went in, but there are going to be a lot of opportunities that weren't there before. So
yeah, it was crazy. I mean, Sunday morning, I actually got I got a spot a half block from the Met.
Yeah. That's insane.
I could have gotten other ones. Yeah, like on Madison Avenue. Yeah. It was bonkers. But in any case, yeah, like by the time I reached them, then they gave me this whole runaround about how, well, they are not taking the payment. It's the hotel. And they go through this thing of calling the same number I've been trying to call for the hotel and not getting an answer to, yes, indeed, I guess there is nobody there. Like, why would I lie to you? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was ridiculous. It was ridiculous, but it was ridiculous, but funny. It did ruin my other museum visit, which was I went to see the Frick collection at the old Whitney, Brower, or whatever on
Brewer
Madison.
or something.
Yeah. Which is in this horrific brutalist edifice, housing,
I've been there. I haven't been to the Frick collection there. I went to the very last thing they were showing at the Whitney before they closed and moved down towards Battery Park. It was a Jeff Koons thing, so I figured that was appropriate for the Whitney and the whole ugliness of the whole place. So we're like, we'll see this Koons thing. We'll get to see the building before it's gone. But yeah, so you went to the Frick collection being housed there?
Yeah, and I love the Frick collection. It's examples of some of the best of, whatever European Western painting ever managed, ever, I mean, it's an amazing collection. But, transposed out of like a rich guy's mansion into this kind of gray non-space, brutalist non-space, felt like I was in like a VR situation or like looking at the stuff online. Like it felt like all context was robbed. And I mean, it's amazing to see, 3 Vermeers in a room together. There's only like 30 that exist, and the Frick has like 3 of them. And that's great. But between the weird setting and being annoyed about Priceline and my hotel bullshit, it kind of ruined that experience. And I let the customer service know about that they'd ruined my day. But
you lousy sons of bitches.
Yeah, the next morning the sun was shining, and I was, sitting on a park bench outside of the Met, and I got to see the Alice Neal show. And I'm glad I got to go early because the line was down the block, was a block long by the time they opened the doors.
I assume they were metering the number of people.
Yeah, it was very limited, very controlled. They take your temperature when you come in, the whole kit and caboodle, but
what is it about Neal's work that really appeals to you?
They're alive. I mean, her primary mode is portraits. She would have people, friends and lovers and children and neighborhood people. She lived in Spanish Harlem for a long time, but in other neighborhoods too. Lifelong New Yorker, She had people semi-famous. Well, there's a famous portrait of Andy Warhol in 1970, right, recovering from getting shot. Then he would have, trans people, like artists, musicians, and children, and she just managed to breathe life into. They're somehow alive. I can't think of any painter in the 20th century that came even close as far as portraiture. And portraiture was not the main mode of 20th century painting, that's for sure. But I don't know if she's got any competitors even. And I was introduced to her work in high school. I had a really good art teacher in high school who pointed her out. So yeah, she's been sort of a touchstone ever since. And seeing so many of them all at once was kind of a dramatic and kind of an earth-shaking experience.
Yeah.
I would have liked to have stayed there longer, but between, having the mask and the, I was in there for an hour. Towards the end of it, it was starting to get snug, Yeah. And I'm not nervous about disease or any of that. I'm all the way vaccinated. It's just, I don't like crowds. I never have. And then there was always a contingent with the audio tours, which just drives me crazy with the audio narration,
Right.
Which is now on smartphones. You can just get an app or whatever to tell you everything instead of looking with your own eyes.
Yeah, I get why some people want context for things, but I get where you're coming from. Is it something you plan on coming back and seeing again before it closes in the summer?
I don't think so. I don't think I'm going back east until, these trips east now will mainly probably be pegged around visits to my parents. And yeah, I think we're all good for at least, I don't know, half a year or so.
With Jewish parents, you're never all good, but that's okay. I understand.
No.
I haven't seen my mom in a couple of years now. So.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
she's out in St. Louis, and I'm not getting out there.
All right. Yeah. It's a fraught thing, but we tolerate.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I went over 8 months without seeing my dad, who lives about 12 minutes away. So once this thing hit, his wife was just like, he's not going out, getting exposed to anything. Or I'm like, well, I'm a potential risk. I'm going to stay far away. So we had to take him out for blood panels. And literally, he was in a full respirator mask, and I was masked up. And I got him in the car, and I thought, yeah, it's possible it's not him. Possible it's not me either. We can't really guarantee that the other one's in the car with us. So, yeah, it was a little weird, this whole situation.
Yeah. With parents, if you can get along with them at all, the thing is that, they're not going to be around forever. So, and I'm getting more and more cognizant of that, the limited amount of time left. So I need to make an effort. And I am.
I get you.
So then, side trips to New York are sort of a fringe benefit of that.
Would you have somebody model for you nowadays?
Oh yeah, no problem. I've had a couple of people over here, not many, sometimes just for a drink or whatever. And a friend of mine, about 3 weeks ago, actually had a birthday party. I mean, of like 4 or 5 people that were all totally vaccinated. And that was kind of funny. People sort of getting into the flow of the rhythm of.
It's weird.
Interaction. Yeah. It's kind of funny. It was kind of funny to watch.
Well, it was one of my past guests, Emily Flake, this New Yorker cartoonist, on Twitter today. She had the moment of, oh my God, is that what my mouth is doing? Like, just realizing that people can now see her face while she's talking to them again. And it's, just one of those things where you didn't have to think about.
A lot of people have probably really gotten into muttering under their breath or whatever.
Or making faces that the other person can't see. But I also had the combined, is my mouth doing that? And oh my God, my hair must look so much more ridiculous than I think it looks, with somebody actually facing me for an hour talking. But
I mean, I had a dry run, or sort of like practicing reintegrating over the last, almost 3 months, because I had to teach a couple of in-person drawing classes. And it was all masked, which was really frustrating, but it was with strangers. I had 5, 6 kids in one class and 7 or 8 in another. It was twice a week, and I had to talk at them for 3 or 4 hours, while they were drawing. And so that was helpful in sort of reintegrating, in-person interaction into my life.
Beyond that, did you get anything good out of the teaching process?
Good. Money.
But, was there anything that, you came out of it with, I never thought about drawing in this way until I had to explain it to these students?
I mean, the hilarious thing is, it's a thing that I've kind of avoided. This is the first classes, it's like school classes in art that I've ever taught at age 50, Yeah. It was amazing how easy it was once I just sort of got, kind of read through the syllabus. I had to take over for an older guy who got injured and decided that he couldn't continue. And I finished out his semester. So a lot of the structure was already in place, and it certainly gave me a lot of ideas on the go of how I would do things differently were I asked to do it again. But it, as far as the larger structure of the college and higher education in general, it confirmed a lot of my feelings about the whole thing, and the reason that I dropped out of grad school nearly 30 years ago and decided not to go into higher education. There's a lot of structural problems and a lot of things that they need to change that I think the pandemic has kind of hastened and pushed along, but it was a long time coming. There's a lot of fat around these institutions that needs to be trimmed. Let's put it that way. So who knows?
But if you did have to design your own curriculum, if you had that freedom to do something like that, you got some ideas, either in a negative sense from what you did this semester.
Well, I mean, like my big master stroke brilliant thing was in the last one. The first one class was just beginning drawing, where they had to do things like draw, cubes and spheres and cones, and learn about 1-point and 2-point perspective. And most of that was really boring to me, and probably to them as well. But the other class was a figure drawing class, which is a lot more up my alley. It's more free form, and I could change the duration. We had a live model who posed behind this weird giant screen, and then she would undress and then take her mask off behind the screen. How effective this was, who knows? The rest of us were masked, know.
So you're only getting her silhouette to draw, basically?
No. It's a clear screen.
Oh,
okay. It's like a scrim. It's like I don't know how to even describe it. It would be like a blackboard, except that the middle part was just a clear plexi.
Gotcha. Cool.
Like across the whole area of the model stand. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's a thing they made up on the go, which who knows how
we all have to do a lot of adjusting.
Yes. It's all like, the world looks a lot more kind of homemade and rinky dink now all over the place. That's for sure. But, so as the semester went, I tried out certain things. And on the last class, what I made them do is I had the model hold the same pose throughout the whole class for about 2 or 3 hours, taking breaks as needed. But each time she took a break, I would make them switch spots and draw on their neighbor's drawing. Mm-hmm. So by the end of it, they all drew on all the drawings from all the different positions. And at first, they were really resistant because, they loved the way they draw, and they were scared, and they put in this work, and now it's thrown away. But after a couple of turns, they suddenly were all interested in the other drawings. They were interacting, and it took a lot of the pressure off of their personal kind of like insecurities or, whatever they were afraid of was gone, because they didn't have that personal investment in their own precious little piece of paper, and stuff like that was, I don't know. I'm sure I'm not the first person that's ever done a thing like this, but it really it was definitely a light bulb moment. And it came, unfortunately, at 3 a.m, when I was on a sleepless night, but whatever, you can't, you get an insight, you shouldn't question it whenever it comes.
I just think exquisite corpse, except in a classroom. That's kind of a neat. I get a different version of it, and everybody ends up with their own exquisite corpse for themselves. But
yeah. Well, there's also, there's a lot of interesting problems. Like, when you see a half-finished figure, do you try to draw it in the style that you see already, or do you just draw it the best you can? So it removes this pressure of like whatever your quote unquote style is. And it freed them in a way that I was surprised at. I didn't know. That was a nice surprise to see how well it worked.
And post-pandemic life for you? Things you want to do, achieve, get out and see?
Well, I think, as I mentioned earlier, the bar I'd worked at, the Skylark, is going to attempt to reopen, which means that's going to
You can finally stop doing all the webcamming that I'm just kidding. I know you're not actually doing male porn, but still.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'll have to give rebates for all those OnlyFans.
Yeah.
Fans
the Dimitri OnlyFans page. That would be awesome.
Hey, man. Unfortunately, like when I was driving a cab, the way I look is attractive to a certain segment of the population. Unfortunately, it's not the segment that I'm attracted to. So.
Yeah. The grand ironies of life. Yeah.
Yes. That's how it is. So hopefully in the next month and a half, 2 months, at least once or twice a week, I'll be bartending, which will change the shape of these weeks, I've always been very good at structuring all the kind of, all the time that I have. I've had to because of doing art and stuff. I'm very disciplined, but having some external structure this way isn't always a bad thing. So I kind of look forward to that. So right now, I write, my newsletter for Mondays, and that kind of sets the week. I'll continue to have that, but like a day or two at the bar also it's a source of stories, a source of material,
Based on the last book, there's always the possibility of new style, the sequel. So.
Well, yeah. For those that don't know, or I don't know how, I don't think Old Style is a beer that's served in the East Coast much. Old Style
Not since those farmers went blind. No, sorry, go on. Yeah. That's an old Simpsons joke. So I didn't know they still made that stuff after those farmers went blind.
Exactly. Yeah. Old Style is kind of like, I don't know what the New York equivalent would be like. Not Budweiser, but like that quality of beer, but like more of a regional.
Like in Baltimore, we had Natty Bo. He had National Bohemian.
Right, exactly. It's exact, or like old, like Genesee or something.
Yeah.
like that. It's a regional, like go-to shitty beer. Like one of the many reasons I decided to call the book Old Style is that every neighborhood bar has a sign, that's provided by Old Style here to this day, even though they've changed ownership. I think Pabst makes them now, which is, Pabst makes Pabst Blue Ribbon and it's just a brand name now. It doesn't mean anything. Right. It's not tied to even a location. I think Pabst is in Wisconsin somewhere now, but I could find another brand name and find out if they're litigious or not litigious like Pabst. I guess it's not.
I'm telling you, go new style.
Pabst, I think, likes it when artists appropriate their logo. I mean, I think they have smart branding or PR people that know there's no such thing as bad publicity. Yeah,
you wear a trucker hat and advertise the booze. So
exactly, yeah, you're just a walking billboard.
Yeah, we'll make a marketing maven out of you yet. You'll see.
You were asking earlier before I think the New York thing about what I was working on. So aside from the ongoing collages, etc., I did actually this morning. I wrote about 1,000 words of what I think will be the next book. And it concerns a once famous horn player who's felled by a mystery disease and his way back to prominence, which will have to be fictionalized for a whole other set of reasons.
Yeah,
that I'll talk about later.
I look forward to seeing it, and if I can, help connect you with an agent or publisher or somebody like that, I'll do my best. So.
I'm open to all suggestions, all influxes of cash into this enterprise are welcome.
I'm telling you, OnlyFans, Dmitry Samarov. That's what we're going with.
Oh boy.
Yeah, that's a whole can of worms. Anyway.
World's not ready.
I had a pal tell me that she wanted me to start doing that in suits. Not nude or anything, just me standing around in suits. I'm like, I don't think that's really going to work.
All joking aside, there's all kinds of things float people's boats, and a lot of it has nothing to do with taking your clothes off.
Yeah. I've just figured there are things I'll do for money, like representing the pharmaceutical industry on a lobbying basis, and then things that I just think are outrageous.
That's the mountain you're going to die on. I see.
Yeah, see, I've got ethics. They're weird, but I've got them. So anyway, Dimitri, thanks for coming back on. I enjoyed the hell out of Old Style, and I'll probably pick up a couple extra copies for pals of mine. I've actually seen copies of some of your other work showing up on friends I don't know that Instagrams. A friend of mine in San Diego had Music to My Eyes among the things she was reading. I'm like, how the fuck did that happen? Whatever.
That's amazing. It's amazing because Music to My Eyes has a little bit of distribution, but the 3 books after, it's just me. I mean, they're not available. They're available in one bookstore in New York, Quimby's New York City in Brooklyn, has all my books as of last weekend because I stopped by there. But other than that, a couple of stores in Chicago and my website. Those are the only places you'll get my books.
we'll get more people reading. You'll see. So, but thanks again, Dmitry. It's good talking to you again. So.
Yeah, always a pleasure. Anytime.
And that was Dmitry Samarov. His new book is Old Style, which you can find at shop.dmitrisamarov.com, along with several of his other books like All Hack, Soviet Stamps, and Music to My Eyes, as well as his artwork and a link for commissions if you want to commission him to paint something for you, especially pet paintings. That's one of his specialties. There'll be a link to this in the show notes, but it is shop.dmitrisamarov.com. shop.dmitrisamarov.com. You can also subscribe to his email at samarov.substack.com/welcome, where there are free and paid options. Generally, it's a free email on Mondays, and then the paid one comes in Thursday. I really enjoy his writing and art in the email, so you ought to at least check out the free option. Dmitry is not on social media for reasons we have discussed in the past, but basically it's for the best. Now, you can support this podcast by telling other people about it, and by sending me postcards, letters, emails, or whatever, or by leaving a message on my Google Voice number, which is 973-869-9659. I do not answer that number directly. I just get notices that there are messages there, so you don't have to worry about me picking up and actually having a conversation with you. But you can leave me a message up to 3 minutes long. Whatever format you use, just tell me what you like and don't like about the show, who you'd like to hear me record with, what movie, TV show, book, art exhibition, music, comic, whatever you think I should turn listeners on to. And if it's cool to share that with listeners, especially if you leave a voice message, just let me know. If you got money to spare, then don't give it to me. Don't put money in my Patreon or PayPal. Give it to individuals and institutions in need. You can find people through GoFundMe, Patreon, Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and other crowdfunding sources. If you're looking for somewhere to start with institutions or foundations, go to your local food bank or the Poor People's Campaign or Freedom Funds or Election Defense Funds. There are a lot of different ways that you can help try to make a better world. Now, last thing, it is now just about 1 year since I published the first issue of my first zine, Haiku for Business Travelers. If you want one, it's free. Just drop me a line or visit haikuforbusinesstravelers.com and hit me up that way. Like I say, it's free. You can kick in a few bucks for postage and production if you want, but it's not a money-making thing. It's just me sharing my art, such as it is. Now, I do feel like a heel that it's been a full year and I haven't put out a second issue. I was really making progress with that early this year, and then I took up drawing, and drawing seems to satisfy whatever that creative outlet is for me, but they aren't drawings that I would necessarily share in the zine. But I don't feel the urge to write essays and other stuff the way I did previously while I'm on this learning curve about drawing trees, leaves, branches, flowers, and whatever the hell else I see on a daily basis. But maybe down the line there'll be a second issue. So, if you get that first one, you're probably going to be on the list to get the second one free also. Our music for this episode is Fella by Hal Mayforth, used with permission from the artist. You should visit my archives to check out my episode with Hal from the summer of 2018 and learn more about his art and painting. And you can listen to his music at soundcloud.com/Mayforth. And that's MAY4TH. And that's it for this week's episode of the Virtual Memories Show. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back next week with another great conversation. You can subscribe to the Virtual Memories Show and download past episodes at the iTunes Store. You can also find all our episodes and get on our email list at either of our websites, vmspod.com or chimeraobscura.com/VM. You can also follow the Virtual Memories Show on Twitter and Instagram at VMSPod, at virtualmemoriespodcast.tumblr.com, and on YouTube, Spotify, and TuneIn.com by searching for Virtual Memories Show. And if you like this podcast, please tell your pals, talk it up on social media, and go to iTunes, look up the Virtual Memories Show, and leave a rating and maybe a review for us. It all goes to helping us build a bigger audience. Now, you've been listening to the Virtual Memories Show. I'm your host, Gil Roth. Keep reading, keep making art, and keep the conversation going.